Hello and welcome back to another guide from MEIOU and Taxes. Today we are going to look deeper into the economy. In fact, as you maybe noticed, I changed the resolution to have the UI bigger because we are going to look at some numbers here and I just want to make sure that everybody can read them and it's obvious what I talk about. Now we are going to look a lot at Prague, but also maybe at another province here, but Prague is a good example to show what we want to do, or what we want to focus on to understand how the economy in fact works. Now, the Prague as a city consists of course, the population, we already covered that, and of course the industries which are present here. And you can dig into a lot of information here, but understanding them and putting them into relation to each other and therefore understand how you can grow your cities or make them profitable is complicated, and that's what I want to help with. Now, one of the main interesting things we are going to look into detail now is the exact industries here. As we, for example, can see, we have a glass industry, processed materials, and armament industries here. But are the numbers here, which are mostly red, good or bad for us? And what exactly is behind there? Like, how much raw materials and fuel materials are in fact consumed by the industries? And maybe do I need to know what, from my planning, I should know probably if before I open up new cities, is it really worth it? Should I open up, for example, armament industries because maybe I have a lot of raw materials and stuff like that? And to know that in more detail, I'm going to switch to an Excel now, or like a spreadsheet I made, which is showing all the industries in detail. Okay, here we are looking at an overview of all industries which I created for rural industries and in fact also urban industries. And now the values I marked with a color are a little bit switching depending on where you are. For example, in Europe, you are getting delicacies and not exotics from a fishery industry. Same, for example, from normal pasture, but we don't have that here. And of course, the sea salt can also change depending on the deposit that you have there. For example, if you look at Salzburg, it's stronger than other salt deposits. But also you have something like hemp or dye in Europe, which are mostly outputting delicacy here. Timber is also an industry which can switch around, but basically what I want to show here, and we can also kill the exotics here because it's Europe and basically don't produce any exotics here. Now what you can see here is that all these industries have a certain number, like how much labor they need and what they produce. For example, you have all these industries which produce fiber here. Most of them produce true fiber or like close to true, but with the benefit of something else, like a little bit of delicacies. I think, for example, hemp is an industry which is present in the Netherlands in-game. Now, we, for example, have a beer industry in Prague, which is one of the cash crop industries. They're all summed up together and they are slightly differently efficient. I didn't want to list them all because like 10 or 12 of them, but basically they're all a cash crop industry and they can range between exotic output of 0.1 to 0.5, which is of course a big difference, and the delicacies can go up to 0.6. So it's a huge gap between these kind of industries and like where you do them, which of course is interesting. Also, then the urban industries of course are requiring certain amount of raw materials here, for example fuel and let's zoom out a bit, like raw materials and fuel materials of fiber, and they are of course outputting all the urban goods which, for example, are needed by your population, at least for example consumer goods. There's one special industry, for example armaments here, which is needing industrial goods, which is coming from the processed materials industry, which is required to produce military goods. And these values are of course interesting because you need to understand, okay, if I need more weapons, then I of course also need better material processed material supply, but also I need raw materials. Else I have to acquire it via my commerce industry, which is of course buying from other regions. Now, before we dive into the values here, which are basically the labor efficiency and the production efficiency, which you can modify in-game via ideas, I just want to show you in-game how it looks like for Prague. Now, looking back at Prague here, we can see that our glass industry here is producing a lot of stuff. And now what you would expect is that the labor is basically one-to-one to the size of the industry, because theoretically a glass industry requires 1 urban labor for 10 size. But it's not the case. So there's something which is reducing the needed labor, and of course also something is changing the output. For example, we are seeing 44 glass luxury output, or in case of processed materials, it's even more obvious now. So you would expect that with the size of 98 for the processed materials industry, you would see, because it's producing 2 industrial, you would see 20 industrial goods, but you see 28. So there's also something modifying the output. So we have definitely 2 values. One, the labor requirements, and the second, the output value. And if you check the UI here in detail, you can immediately see that there's, for example, urban output here, which are important. But also here, for example, the commercialization is increasing the urban industry output. Now the labor demand is a little bit more obscured. Is, for example, the urban production efficiency here, and also the guys you have, for example, here, Otaka, Colorado, urban production efficiency plus 1%. It's similar here, and therefore decreasing the amount of labor you require. Now, if we were to take all these values and percentages we just have or found in the UI here or found in game, we could add them to the Excel and see what happens. Here we are again, back in the Excel here, and I marked the processed materials here in green, and where as said, it outputs 2 industrial goods here. And now we are going back to the percentages here. And in fact, what the game does is not multiply anything by certain amounts. Instead, it's dividing certain factors. And one of the first things you need to know is that the urban production efficiency that you, for example, get by technology, but also by your idea groups, is reducing the labor you require, but also increasing the production you get. Basically, we have roughly 7.7% labor production bonus. I have checked around a lot of times to roughly verify. It could also be 7. I'm not 100% sure how much it is, because the factors where you get it from are a little bit obscure. You have the advisor, you have the technology. There's also, I think, a small impact from burgers. Therefore, it's roughly 7%. And it's combined with a 10% decrease flat on all industries which are currently present. I think this is the 10% decrease overall is to factor in negatives, which you, for example, could get by the reforms, which I'm going to show at a later point. And the production efficiency, which is basically urban output, which you, for example, get by the modifier in your province, they are also working in a similar way. Therefore, for example, we had 15% from commercialization, 10% from urban, the province modifier basically, and we had a little bit from our technology. So round up, it should be around 25-30%. Let's just say 30% here. And Interestingly, now here is what we can see here is the profitability of this industry, and it's pretty terrible because what I put in here are the exact values of labor which we currently have, which was 6.8 for rural labor and 19 for urban labor. So it's this value up here, and therefore all the industries are not profitable, which is not surprising in the end. I mean, I didn't update the other ones, but they will not be getting that much better. However, there's a slight negative here, and for example, if we were to drop the price to a more reasonable price value, for example 9, which is more common, then you would see that we are suddenly profitable, so the number is above 0. And if you even drop the urban labor price to 7, for example, it gets even better. Of course, what is most important here is that you want to stack the modifiers here, because let's assume that you, for example, pick up a technology group which is going to give you more urban production efficiency. You could get to like 12% with some technologies and idea groups, and then you would also get to 35% already, and therefore the income suddenly is increasing quite fast. And that's very important to know, because all these kind of factors here are pretty hefty if you calculate it together. And they are, of course, very strong if you stack it together. For example, if you manage to get, for example, up to 40% production bonus, which is really hard to get already, and therefore you have like 15% of less labor required, you would have 6 in a profit. And that's very important to consider, because it increases your values tremendously. Now let's go back to what we had as a start value, which was 7% and roughly 30%. You would see that this is less, and even worse if we go back to the roughly 19, which was our urban wage currently. Oh, going back to the game, as I mentioned, you basically want to stack these kind of modifiers here, and the same applies for rural industries. For example, you don't have modifiers like here, but you have the irrigation as an infrastructure which you could build, which give you modifiers on your output here. But also you can get, I think it's shown here, it's not 100% correct what's shown in here, but you also have rural production efficiency, which you get by administrative tech, which of course also decreases the labor amount for rural industries and also increases the output value. However, the output value is mostly modified, for example, here by the irrigation and maybe idea groups that you have. I think this Slovakia here, not Slovakia, but Bohemia doesn't have any. It has a mining bonus, but there are other countries which maybe have an agriculture bonus, which is very strong. I think, for example, Egypt has one. Most of the time, or however, you have an upkeep reduction, which is basically making the upkeep costs of farmlands and stuff like that more cheap, therefore reducing income or profits indirectly. Now, in regards to cities, you don't want to build too many of them. For example, in this campaign I opened up some cities at the beginning, but most of the time you want to farm these kind of centers of production, and you want to lure as many of them into your country, and these scale with the overall production in the region. Therefore, sometimes you have to open up more cities to generate more of these centers, even though, for example, this city here, it's a very small one. And if you look at the industry here, it has a almost 100% throughput. It's still not really profitable. Like here, textile is negative, processed materials are negative, housewares are negative, because we don't have any positive modifiers here. We don't have a center of production, and with all the reforms, even though we already did some, like we went to extensive charters already, it's still not profitable. If you now imagine that we would still have city charters or unsupported charters here, then we would have a -5 or -15% production decrease, which is massive in the end. Also, consider that, for example, inflation has a minor effect on production efficiency, therefore labor and output, but also stability has a negative if you go below zero. And the gains you can get for the efficiencies are mostly technology. Yeah, so as you can see here, there are some urban production efficiency values sprinkled around the tech tree. There's also some sprinkled around for rural industries. And yeah, there are some idea groups which you could do to get more stuff. I think, for example, is it in here? No, it's not. There's economic ideas here, which gives urban and rural production efficiency. There's one which is decreasing labor costs. In fact, maybe it's also economic. I'm not 100% sure where it is. Somewhere there's a modifier which reduces labor cost for projects. This one is urban production efficiency and rural production efficiency, therefore reducing the required population and required and it increases the output you generate. Therefore, this technology or this idea group is very strong if you want to build a strong industry. 2.5% doesn't seem much, however, it is quite a lot in the general picture, because these bonuses are hard to get and they can determine or make your city profitable compared to all other cities, and therefore get you more production centers here, for example these ones, and therefore get even more production income and therefore making you even more profitable. Yeah, and I think that's it for the second, just at least to regards to production modifiers. Last, what I want to show is that the commerce industries plays a special role. You can see the commerce industry, of course, here in your industry tab, and you can see it also here. And now you see that it's negative. Give me a sec for the music again. And doesn't mean that they are not making money, because the commerce is basically buying and selling. What you want to look out for is the local value here. It says that they are doing 521 ducats profit this year in this sector, which is very, very good. Therefore, they are making a profit. However, they might be just in a buying phase currently, because the merchants or the commerce industry is filling the stockpile of the province here. For example, this province has a stockpile of food of 1,308, but also other products, and the commerce industry is basically filling it up or selling from it to make a profit from there. Therefore, this value here can switch around depending on what the market currently is allowing for. And as a last tip, higher education industry, they are working a little bit special because they use literate as labor. Literate is basically scaling with your residents, so basically scaling with population, and they are basically always profitable. Always go for it, and it gets even better as soon as you hit casual literacy, because this has an effect that it increases knowledge output, but it also increases knowledge demand, therefore basically creating a second profitable market for your residents to work in. And it is a little bit separate to the standard industries, however very profitable in most cases. Yeah, that's it basically for the deeper look into the economy. If you want to check out what you really want to do and like how to find out where you can make profits, you really have to dig into the price details of the other sectors, other trade nodes. Consider where to place your merchant. Maybe you need more merchants, therefore you should pick up, for example, trade ideas here, which give you more merchants from trade centers. For example, we have important, I think, a major center of trade here, which is giving 0.5 merchants there, plus 50%. It would be almost another one. You really want to check out what you can do. You maybe need to open up merchants here, especially if you are, for example, a colonial empire. You really want to go into regions where you can buy cheap stuff For example, let's take a look here. In Bohemia, we have a price for delicacies of 23 and an exotic price of 19, roughly. If we go to Yemen here, it has an exotic price of 11 and a delicacies price of 37. So if we could buy exotics here and sell delicacies here, but also sell luxuries here, which with 25 is also very high. But for example, we could buy delicacies, I think here in Tunis. Now it's all relatively high. I don't know where delicacies are cheap, maybe in Russia. Yeah, 19 here. So you could sell stuff around and therefore make a fortune by doing that. However, you need market access by having provinces in the trade nodes, which is of course easier as a colonial empire. If you are playing Bohemia, you are more or less locked into Europe. Therefore, you want to play efficient and not wide in form of accessing markets you don't have normally access to. So if you play Bohemia, you are more or less locked into the range of trade nodes here, and the price differences will not be massive here. However, you could get access, for example, here in Crimea and the Caspian Sea into goods which are coming from the east through Siberia or Persia here. But also you could try to get access to Egypt here to get some exotic trade from, well, the Red Sea and India. However, in most cases you will not get close to that, rather will stay confined here. And therefore, try to get as many modifiers as you can to make the best city you will ever have. And yeah, if you have questions, feel free to ask, and see you next time.